Archie Norman's the CEO of Aurigo Asset Management, but most people know Archie from when he was at Asda, and he did the successful turnaround with Alan Leighton, and he also mentored a new group of executives, Andy Hornby and Richard Baker included, who are now running FTSE 100s themselves. So Archie's going to share his secrets of being a CEO. So good to see you again, Archie.
Good to see you, Steve. Yeah.
I think, could we start with the credit crunch, which seems to be sort of front of mind of people at the moment? What's your point of view about maybe the severity and how long it could last based on where we are today?
I think every recession, every downturn is different from the previous one. The anatomy is different, and the way this one has come about is very different from anything we've seen for the last 20 years. If anything, it's more like the early 1970s. There was a real property crash, house prices declining, loss of consumer confidence, big public sector deficits. So there's no real hope for fiscal stimulus. And everything says we're going into a long-term change in markets in the UK anyway, and probably in the United States. This isn't going to be over in a few months. It's going to be years.
Okay. And if that's the case, what advice would you have for other CEOs at an operational level? You know, how do you deal in this sort of
Well,
look,
you know, if you're a manager, your job is to manage in good times and bad. There's no point in getting depressed about it. No, you've got to say, right, we're going downhill, so my job is to manage it going downhill. And great managers take advantage of the bad times to create competitive advantage. But it's not going to be, there's going to be some financial hits. I mean, it's going to be tougher.
Yeah.
So I think that the right thing to do is to take it on the up. I mean, you've got to get your people faced into it. It's very important you don't get this syndrome of the continuous surprise. It's always getting worse. So get people to what I call panic early. Get to the bottom right at the outset. You've got losses, declare the losses. You've got luggage overboard. Yeah? Get people faced into the severity of it. And then, from there, they can see progress. What's debilitating for an organisation is to constantly have this sense things are getting worse, things are getting worse. There's another nasty surprise. Oh, we understated our write-offs. That's really demoralising.
Okay. And are there any other sort of operational things that you would do besides sort of really getting all the luggage out? Are there any sort of suggestions you have about how to ride through the downturn?
Look, I think the downturn is like the upturn. But it just means it's more important than ever to get right to the hard basics of the business. So get to the customers and secure them.
Yeah.
And get on the front line. Get your people motivated about it. Don't get them feeling that somehow because there's a global recession they're a failure. It's not. We can't help that.
Yeah.
We've got to ride the waves. And obviously a lot of the things hobbies that grow up in good times when there's a bit of money around. The little sort of peccadillos, the sacred cows, they have to go, and people want to see them go because they know times are tough. They want to see the boardroom make the sacrifice as well as the front line. And as I said, you face into that early. Much better if you're going to take a hit. You're going to take people out. Take it at the beginning. Yeah. Take one big hit, and then you can move on from there if you possibly can.
Okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And what about in terms of the CEO, the leadership, the personal leadership, and any advice for CEOs as they go through this? Because some of the CEOs are from a younger generation and haven't maybe seen anything like this.
No, I think the great thing for if you haven't seen anything like this is don't read the media. Just assume this is life as it will now continue. Right. Just assume. Don't assume this is going to be a few months and will come right next year. I mean, what I hear when I listen to people talking about recession today is they say, when do you think we'll come out of it? Assume you'll never come out of it and trade that way and you'll probably get it right.
Yeah.
That's your mentality, is don't get depressed about it, get ahead. And just assume this is the way it is. Okay. Yeah? And then your people want you to see you, they want to see you lead through it. They're going to look to the chief executive is looking all depressed and wondering when we come out of it. Then they're not going to be very inspired. They assume the chief executive thinks, right, this is the way it is now, guys. Here am I. I'm on the front line with you. I'm going to be out with the customers. I'm going to be out visiting the branches or whatever it is. Then you'll lead them through it.
Okay. And how do you balance then the short term with not cutting things that are key to winning in the long term?
Oh, well, I mean, that's one of those 1,000 little judgments you have to make.
Yeah.
You know, you have to know this is the time where you're forced to decide what's critical and what's an indulgence. And the most important thing is protect your good people. And don't stop doing things. You know, people go into a recession thinking, I've just got to stop. I stop promoting people, I stop recruiting people, etc. The development of capability in your company has got to continue. So I've still got to be recruiting good people. I've still got to be dealing with the underperformers. I've still got to be promoting my smart guys coming through because their careers can't stop because it's a recession. Yeah? They want to feel we're making progress. But there will be things in every company which actually, when times are tough, turn out to be non-essential.
Yeah.
And as I said, the main thing is find those early. Don't wait halfway through.
Yeah.
No, find those early, and then people feel they're climbing uphill. They're climbing forward. There's a sense of progression.
Yeah.
And give people a roadmap. You know, people want to know how we're going to work through. People will follow you anywhere. You know, if they believe that when they've been through the trenches, there's going to be some sunny uplands afterwards.
Yeah.
So paint a picture how we're going to get through it.
Yeah. And do you think that there's also, you know, as you go into a downturn, there's distressed opportunities, you know, in terms of companies and maybe people?
I think there are, but I think it's a bit of a delusion. What happens when things go badly, when the water level falls, then you see the shipwrecks come out. And often, because they're a lot cheaper than they were before, you think that's a bargain. Well, that's cheap. Actually, it's the new world. Values have fallen. They have fallen.
Yeah.
And it may be cheap, but there's a reason why it's cheap. And I think you'll find that most people who trade successfully in the downturn aren't people who try and hoover up, you know, the failures. They're people who concentrate on growing their market share. Or this is time to get organic. Really drive your market share. No, be the people who are still pushing forward, who are still motivated, who are still aggressive as you go through the recession.
Yeah. Okay, brilliant. And there's a lot of focus at the moment on alternative capital, you know, sovereign wealth funds coming into companies like Barclays and also PE firms. You know, there was recently Bradford and Bingley were looking at a PE option. What's your view on alternative capital? And I suppose in particular, given your focus on private equity, you know, how will private equity firms go through the downturn? You know, will they continue to take over companies or will they take strategic stakes?
Well, I think this time capital is needed, and you don't worry too much about what source it comes from. Actually, private equity capital isn't so very different from public capital. Sovereign wealth capital, the Dubai or Qataris or Singapore, at the end of the day, it's capital, and they're going to be an interested shareholder, and there's nothing that sinister about that. And you know, thank goodness they're there.
Yeah.
So they're propping up our banking system. I think for private equity, this is a change. You know, private equity, we forget most private equity companies have a big portfolio. So actually, they've got a big investment in this recession, and they're experiencing that. Private equity partners are living it. They're watching their portfolio with probably increasing dismay as it goes down in value. So they're living through it, and then they've got the funds, uninvested funds behind them. And deploying those funds is also becoming much more difficult. A lot of uninvested funds today are pretty idle. They're sitting on their hands. And in times of high uncertainty, private equity will do that. They hope there will be a moment at which they can move in when values are very low. And history relates that private equity makes its money coming out of the downturn. So we will see. But the issue today, obviously, is you can't get debt finance.
Yes.
The reason you see people investing in private equity, looking at financial institutions, house builders and so on, is because they've already got leverage. Now, Bradford and Bingley is already highly leveraged. So you invest in Bradford and Bingley, you don't have to go out and find any more debt. They've got enough debt as it is.
Yeah. And do you know, a lot of PLC CEOs have been very wary about private equity because, you know, the change of ownership and potentially a change of management. But do you think that the PE firms could become more like strategic investors? You know, and take a sort of more like partial, significant stakes?
Yes, I think there's a convergence between public equity and private